All right. Good morning, Doug. We're here with a Q&A. Lots of questions from our viewers, so I'm going to try and get through them as fast as I can. For our viewers who are interested in submitting questions for these Q&As, the best thing to do is join our Telegram group. There's a link to that in the description for all of our videos. Join the Telegram group, and then I will request questions in advance of any of these Q&As, and we get through as many of them as we can. So, Doug, starting off, would you consider participating in public anti-COVID demonstrations something useful to our freedom and worthy to be part of?
Well, I'm not a fan of mob scenes generally, and certainly not joining a mob, even if the mob serves a constructive purpose. So look at it from your personal point of view. What's in it for me? Best thing that can happen is that you show the flag along with 1,000 or 10,000 other people. Worst thing that can happen is they got a picture of your face being at the demonstration, and now you're on another watch list for the state. So you got to make your own decision. But personally, you're not going to find me in a mob, I wouldn't say.
No, and one of the biggest things I always encourage people to do is to avoid a mob scene, because there is a mob psychology that is real. It's just like if you were one of those people, right as this pandemic was rolling out, and you walked into a Costco and people were running for the toilet paper aisle, you would think, I should get some toilet paper. Even if you objectively know I have a garage full of toilet paper already, like there's something it does to your psychology, like the humans around you. So it's a dangerous situation. You can lose your rationality very quickly in something like that.
Look what happened to those poor people on March 6th.
January 6th, yeah.
Oh, was that what it was? Yes. Okay. Time flies.
It does fly. Right. Those people are still in jail. Still in jail.
Not all of them. I think there's only about, I don't know, but I read that there are only about 20 that are in solitary in DC jail.
The real serious, the hard cases.
Yeah. But yeah. I don't know how many people have been busted in some way, harassed in some way.
Yeah.
Well, it's a news blackout. You don't know anything accurately. It's like in Solzhenitsyn's Gulag archipelago. You just don't know anything.
Nope. All in that, yeah. In that book, all of a sudden someone's gone. You kind of hear rumors about where they might be. You can go and request information. It might not get answers. Right.
And
exactly.
Requesting information automatically lists you as a suspicious person.
Right. A known associate.
Right.
All right. So next question is, what is your recommended asset for long-term wealth preservation? So if you had to pick one asset with the idea that you're holding it for let's say a decade or more, what would you choose? Gold, crypto, real estate, or something else?
Look, I want to say crypto, it's got a lot of advantages, but on the other hand, it's a new asset class. So it wouldn't be crypto if I had to pick one. Gold, can't go wrong with that, and you can bury it. I wouldn't put it in a safe deposit box in this day and age. I think that would be a mistake. Even a private safe deposit box, I wouldn't do that. So what can you do? You can bury it in a safe place and hope that you have access to the property. Gold would qualify. Real estate, I guess that's okay in the right area, but even then, I can think of all kinds of things that can go wrong. Frankly, I don't know if there's any place that you can hide that's actually secure, which is not good for an orderly, stable society. If you really, when you think about these things, can't rely on anything. That the chimpanzees may not overwhelm and take away from you.
All right. Next question. Did you watch the show, The Mandalorian?
No, I haven't. What is that?
Mandalorian is it's a Disney show about a Star Wars spinoff that they made into a TV series on Disney Plus, which is this special new Disney channel. and it's basically about the the Mandalorians are the oh my gosh, I can't, the bounty hunter people,
Oh,
anyway, so that's what it was about. But if you haven't seen it, then I guess the question is mute. So
that's too
okay,
bad. Well, you mentioned bounty hunters. I'm all for bounty hunters, actually.
well, that's what they do. So like Boba Fett, you remember Boba Fett from Star Wars series?
No, I don't recall that character.
He was the one who captured Han Solo
Oh,
and froze him.
no. I know there's 9 in the full series, and I must have missed that particular one.
Okay, all right, let's see. Doug, do you have any advice for someone who is moving from Canada to a more free country like Mexico? Just general and practical advice for those making the move away from tyranny into unknown and a different country.
Well, put yourself in the shoes of your ancestors that moved to Canada, probably from Europe. Now that was risky. They probably came over with no money, much less idea of what laid across the seas, not counting the fact that sailing across the seas was dangerous and unpleasant, and arriving in a place trying to figure out how am I going to feed myself next. So, so are you less of a man than your ancestors?
That's a great way to frame the question. Yeah. I think the other thing, just some basic, super practical advice is that you got to know the place where you're going as much as if you can. I mean, your ancestors probably didn't have that information, probably, but they may have had relatives that were here already, or friends, from where they came from that are here already. They gave them sort of a base of operations that gave them, easier access to opportunities. So, there are a lot of people that have relocated recently to Mexico, for instance. And we know that people like Berwick, is there, and he's got several active networks down there, and so tapping into those makes a lot of sense. And almost certainly, your ancestors probably did benefit from some kind of a network that they were plugging into, whether it be, cultural or otherwise.
That does make sense, and I have to add that it's important to have a grip on the local language, because if you can't communicate with people, you can't do anything with them. It makes things much, much harder. So if you're going to make that leap, try to learn Spanish. It's not easy to learn a foreign language, especially when you're an adult. It's much harder than it is when you're young, for a number of reasons, I guess. But I'd say that's quite important. But
Yeah.
don't let it stop you. Don't let it stop you.
Yeah. And how would you go about learning of a new foreign language? Like what are some of the tactics, I guess, you would use to throw yourself into it?
Well, I don't know if you're married or not, but get a long-haired dictionary once you arrive on scene. That's a very good way.
Is
And you can get everything online, free language courses today that are just absolutely wonderful. I mean, to this day, I get a communication from some group, what the hell are they called, that sends me several Spanish sentences, complex sentences, with a new word. So it kind of keeps me in the groove, things like that, all the way up to advanced courses. So
yeah, good. One other thing I'd also say is that just one thing I did once when I moved to Argentina, and my Spanish is awful, but in trying to improve my Spanish, I would watch local newscasts regularly, like just to watch, because I could, I've watched newscasts, so I could kind of see, it was easier for me to visually put together the language. Like I could see maybe what they were talking about. And when I would, they would discuss new words, I would try and reference them and try and figure out how to use them. But watching movies and I think TV and whatever in a foreign language is a great way to sort of get context for it, to kind of immerse yourself in it. Usually with Spanish subtitles also, if you can see it written, I found that helpful.
Yeah, and you know, there's a series of books that I really like and I recommend highly. It's called the Flashman series. Have you read any of those?
No, I haven't.
Well, they're absolutely marvelous. They're, I forget the name of the author who died a few years ago, but it's about this complete rogue uh, who turns out to be the bully from Tom Brown's School Days, which was a very famous book that was written in the 19th century in England, who was the school bully, horrible person. So anyway, Flashman is his name, and he joins the British Army and advances from just being a sub-lieutenant to all the way to a general. And he goes through all these historical things that happened through the 19th century, acting like a complete rogue and cad and just a horrible person, but a fun person, an enjoyable person. There are people like that, okay? And two things that Flashman could do that get him through get him out of all kinds of trouble. Number one, he's a superb linguist. That's the one skill he's really got. He picks up languages very well. And the second thing is he's an excellent horseman. And those two skills basically get him out of all the trouble he gets in. But I'd read that series of books and they'll just trap you. Very well written. But anyway, Flashman showed that being a good linguist is very, very important. And it is.
Great. Okay. I'm going to check those books out. Next question. Doug, you mentioned Marin Katusa as, a great investor, good selector of stocks, puts together great deals. Marin's latest quest centers around carbonomics, more specifically carbon credits. Do you see this as a commodity, just like Marin does? And what do you think the opportunities are in that space?
Well, I am a very large investor in his company, which is called Carbon Streaming. It's trading at about, I don't know what it's trading at, $2 now or something like that. And it's not even listed on a major exchange, which it will be in the next month or something like that. So do I believe in this? No, I think that I think this whole global warming thing and carbon, I think it's all bullshit. I mean, frankly. I'm not even sure if Marin believes in it. I haven't actually sat down and talked to him about it. But one thing he believes in, and I believe in too, is that the powers that be are going to cram it down our throats. And everybody's going to have to buy carbon credits or use less carbon. They'll have all kinds of formulas, all kinds of nonsense. And he structured this company in a way, I think, that it should make a lot of money. In a way, I hate to profit from what amounts to a giant fraud. And of course, a giant fraud isn't a sound foundation to put long-term money in. But yeah, I'm a believer in what's going to happen, even if I don't believe in global warming or carbon streaming or any of that stuff. So it's my largest single investment in the stock market.
Wow.
Ever, because it's so sometimes you don't invest according to what's ideologically correct or where your heart is. It's just
you could see what's you could read the tea leaves pretty clearly on this one. I mean, ESG investing is a huge priority. These, whether it's it's an abstract or it's a artificial commodity. It's not a commodity. It's created by the market. It's a commodity that is created by government mandate, but that doesn't mean it isn't a commodity, right? If it's required.
Yeah, exactly. It's not something that Marin plans on holding it for a long, long time. And unfortunately, with the bad guys in charge, this trend will probably keep growing for a long, long time. I'm going to be a little bit more quick on the trigger finger than Marin is in this case.
Yeah.
But I expect her to be rewarded.
Okay. All right. Next question. Sorry, that was a repeat. It says, I'm curious if you think during a dollar collapse that there will be a bank bail-in in the USA, or may they take brokerage trading accounts of US citizens?
Well, both good questions, but look at it this way. With interest rates on mortgages in the 3% or less area, if interest rates ever go back up to reasonable levels, forget about the levels that they were in the early 80s, those mortgages are going to be worthless to the lenders. They're going to be deeply underwater. Their assets are going to be totally destroyed. So all the banks are going to be bankrupt from having made stupid loans. What are they going to do? The US government can't have all these big banks go, or little banks, have all the banks go under. They all make mortgage loans. So what are they going to do? Well, maybe they can bail out the banks, yeah, but they'll probably bail in too with people that are, have too much money sitting in a. So I wouldn't keep more than the insured amount in any one bank. Now, for most people, that's not a problem. It's $250,000, but still, some people have more than that, and I just wouldn't do it. I'd open up numerous bank accounts with numerous banks. Maybe that'll protect you. As far as brokerage firms are concerned, I think things like Keogh plans, HR10s, pension plans, all that, IRAs, all this type of thing. Yeah, that's all subject to being thrown into a pot. It's very much what they did in Argentina, where everybody that had a private pension, it was basically, because, we're worried that everybody's going to lose their money in their private pensions. I mean, the markets are fluctuating so much. We'll put it in. We'll take care of it. Yeah, of course. So I think there's a good chance that'll happen here in the US at some point in the future. I don't know when. Maybe it'll happen after the stock market crashes at some point. I mean, I don't know how long they can keep it floating on air the way it is right now, printing up money. It's hard to say.
Right.
You're dealing with abnormal psychology. You're dealing with crazy people who are not only psychologically aberrant, but whose actual beliefs are crazy. It's not just they're crazy. Their beliefs are crazy besides, that they've built their lives around. They think 2 + 2 = 5.
Right.
So,
And they don't seem to be have any constraints. I mean, the Fed wasn't limited, despite the fact it was illegal for the Fed to buy junk bonds last year. They did it. It's outside the Fed mandate. So that's illegal, but they did it. It's illegal for the CDC to have a moratorium on rents. They did it. So these things it doesn't seem like there are limits to what could be done or what people think that they can do, those who are in charge.
Yeah. It's like their answer is, so what? Or so sue me,
Right. Exactly. As if that works. Yeah.
Right.
All right. So this question relates to philes. So through tribes, kingdoms, and nation states, geographical proximity and its constituents has always been a common thread. This is even true of personal relationships. With the advent of philes, how does Doug see them being successful if phyle members are scattered over long distances? Proximity naturally creates some form of organization, common roads, courts, police, taxes, etc. Thus why local governments are established. How do we divorce from our local government and unite solely under phyle governments?
Well, it really wouldn't have been possible before the advent of the internet and email and the telephone, for that matter. I think these things will evolve further, despite the fact that I'm sure that the state is going to try to make using the internet in, let's say, subversive ways harder or more inconvenient. But, my friends are all over the world, and we keep in touch all over the world. And of course, in today's world, it's harder to get together than it was. And I don't think it's going to get much easier, quite frankly, for a number of reasons. So the market will handle it. Listen, the market handles everything. I remember when I was renting a townhouse in Washington, D.C., and in the basement, was a nice basement. We had some of those video machines that you find in arcades.
Yeah.
We
Yep.
bought and put down there just for amusement. And anyway, so we spent a lot of time in the basement, and the lights were always blowing out in the ceiling of this rental house, and it was really inconvenient. So my girlfriend said, what are you going to do about those lights? Why don't you replace them all? I said, well, it's not my house, and I'm constantly replacing it. And anyway, we're going away on a trip together for a month, and magic will happen. Well, who's going to fix it? And I said, don't worry, the market's going to do it. Because I believe in the market solving all these problems. It was a joke. It was a joke. The market will do it. So anyway, a friend of mine, Wainwright Dawson, stayed in the house while we were gone most of the time. And Wainwright's that kind of guy. He's just handy. He likes to fix stuff. And he got in there and he fixed all the lights and he replaced all the bulbs. And I got back, we flipped them on. They didn't blow out again. And I said, see, the market did it.
That's great. That's great. Okay. Doug, this question's about health insurance. So the question is, when, the question is really, well, he says, what did you do, especially when you're younger than 65 for health insurance? Because this guy, he says 38, he's a family of 4 and aggressively saving money so that he can become, financially independent. But his choices for health insurance, the cheapest, the bronze HMO is $1,000 a month premium plus with a $14,000 deductible.
That is shocking.
Yep, and the most expensive plan, the without having the 14 grand deductible, is, and more choices of doctors, is $2,200 a month.
Okay, that is. We're closing in on $30,000 per year. And I'm not even sure if that's, well, it may be tax deductible if it's through a corporation. So I don't know if that's what the tax treatment of those premiums are or not, but that is insane. So the answer to the question is, you don't want insurance on anything if you can avoid it, anything.
Mm-hmm.
Because after you pay for the commissions and the administrative expenses and God knows what, it's a bad deal. And then you've got to file claims and all this. So what you got to do is try to self-insure if you possibly can. And for medical insurance, first of all, I wouldn't call it health insurance because health is something that you provide for yourself. It's medical insurance for medical catastrophes. I would try to self-insure. I really would very seriously put that money into a separate account. Separately. Listen, if you need a serious operation, okay, you're not going to get it done here in the U.S. because the system is so cockamamie in the U.S. Things cost many times what they do in normal countries. I mean, some of the best medical care in the world, it's well known now, and it's been well known for years, is in Thailand. You go there and you don't live in a crappy hospital ward. It's like being in a 4-star hotel, and everything will cost you maximum 25%, maybe much less than that if you have a serious operation that you need to have done.
Yeah, that facility at the hospital there, the big one is it Bummangrad or something like that?
Something like that, yeah.
It's amazing. I toured it. It was unbelievable. It was the nicest hospital I've ever been in. It was amazing. Nothing like it wasn't like a hospital actually.
No, it's a 4-star hotel. And the nurses are doing impersonations of Ilse She-Wolf of the SS.
Exactly. They're very friendly actually instead. Yeah. Well, one of the things was interesting about the whole insurance market, especially health insurance, is completely broken in the US. And as an employer, I see these costs go up with my employees every year. So, on average, we spend for our employees about $22,000 a year for health insurance. Wow. Now that's money that we could pay them in salaries, or instead, or something else, right? But instead, it's just to give them the baseline insurance. It's not great stuff, right? It's just the stuff that they, that the market expects, I guess, people to, the employers to provide this. So you do, and they're shitty choices. They're just awful. But compare that. I remember this was a little while ago, but like 2010, 2009, I'm living in Buenos Aires and my daughter is not feeling well. And so I asked a friend who lived there, what I should do as far as, getting her in to see a doctor. He said, oh, just call this guy. He'll come to your house and check her out and, help give her whatever she needs. And the guy who came to our house, the doctor, was a cardiologist who for $100 came to our apartment, checked her out, prescribes it didn't have to prescribe antibiotics. He gave her some antibiotics and left and said, let me know if you need anything else at all. So that's what it cost. I didn't have to have insurance for that. It cost $100. And then
out of the question in the U.S., totally out of the question.
Totally out of the question in the U.S. Yeah, but I do have a private doctor here. I have these health insurance things. I have these same crappy plans that this guy was talking about. But there are doctors that won't take insurance, that are totally private, and and it's a fixed fee per month that you pay them just to have. But I can text my doctor anytime. I can call her on a Sunday. She'll pick up the phone. Anything I need, she will take care of. And it is substantially less expensive than any of these things. So, if you seek them out, there are doctors, because this money goes to the insurance company. It doesn't go to the doctors. And there are doctors who don't want to deal with insurance or any of this garbage, and who, you'd probably more ideologically align with anyway. So seek them out.
Yeah, no question. My co-author on the novels, John Hunt, who's an MD, although an MD, like many, who no longer actively practices, he keeps his license up, but he doesn't practice just because it's the risk reward and the aggravation it's not worth it for him anymore. So he doesn't, but he's very actively involved with the medical group and monitoring what the insurance companies are doing. And he gave me a paper that was written by a doctor, I think in Oklahoma City, who has a surgical center and is able to deliver top quality surgery with a smile for something like 15% of the going rate, because he's totally opted out of all this type of thing. And his business is doing, although all the medical associations and hospitals are all trying to put him out of business for delivering a quality product cheaply. But I think I can ask John, anybody that would like to read this paper explaining exactly how this works, because nobody can believe how something can cost 6 times what it should, as demonstrated by somebody who's. So send us an email and I'll ask John and we'll send it out to you. It's worth reading.
Great. Okay, we'll do that. We'll actually send it out to everybody who signs up on our email list. And if you can join the email list, the link for that is in the description as well to every video. So join the email list and I'll send it out to all the participants on that list. One thing you said about insurance, I just want to address really quickly. In general, you said you should avoid insurance whenever possible. That's a broad brush statement. Can you explain more about that, about why insurance is not worth it?
Because it's a question of, you have to pay for them to provide this service. Now, there's some things that you have to insure. There's no way of getting around it, like automobile insurance, for instance. It's legally mandated. You have no choice. And of course, in today's litigious society, I would pay for auto insurance anyway, because catastrophic accidents do happen and they can wipe you out. Okay, things like that. I take insurance for fire and flood and the like for my house. Okay, that's fine. But try to avoid insurance as much as you can, especially in things where there's a degree of moral risk involved, where people are in a position to take advantage of the insurance company, because especially when times get tough, they'll try to do that. And that's going to be reflected in your rates. So do it yourself if you possibly can.
Well, I was thinking about a lot of young people are in their 20s, and between the combination of debt that they have, a lot of it's student loan debt, maybe it's auto debt and other consumer debt, and the insurance, the expectation that everyone have insurance for, of course, for their car, for their renter's insurance, they have to have health insurance. And they don't have to anymore have health insurance, but they did have to have insurance legally before under the Obamacare thing, which most people in their 20s, especially young men, you really don't need insurance, really. I mean, you do some catastrophic stuff at most, you break your arm, something like that. But it seemed to me like there's like this squeeze between debt and insurance, and they're almost like the inverse of the same thing. It's a financing, and it's bad decision making, obviously can cause you to, take on too much insurance and too much debt. But both of these things are seen as not socially bad, or, the individual should have a nicer car. Why not have a nicer car? You work hard, you deserve it, so of course you need a good education. So have student loan debt. That's okay. And of course, every responsible person has health insurance. It's like, and so these things, it just seems like between debt payments and insurance payments, it is almost impossible to get off a financial treadmill.
Well, and then eventually you're going to add on mortgage payments, which means also tax payments to the local government. And at that point, you're trapped. You've got to stay on the treadmill to meet all these obligations that you've assumed.
That's right. So I'd avoid debt, avoid unnecessary insurance. I mean, yeah. Okay. Next question. Actually, I have a couple duplicates in here. So Doug, in preparation for a coming crash, would you advise moving some or all of my 401k investments into something like gold and silver? I'm wondering if the extra 10% penalty is still worth running for cover. Now, first of all, we don't give individual financial advice, but so just in general, do you think that that's a good idea? Because a lot of people have a lot of capital in these retirement plans.
Yeah, of course. Well, one part of the question, of course, is the government at some point, for some reason, going to, in effect, nationalize everybody's private pension plan? So you want to be out before that happens. Another point to consider is, depending, it's nice to be able to tax deduct the money that you put into it. That's helpful. And for it to grow tax-free within.
Especially if you have employer matching, it's
got to take advantage of that. Absolutely got to take advantage of that. But it may be a fool's paradise because of state intervention. I would not put gold and silver themselves in the plan because there's no yield. I mean, there can be yield on gold and silver if we lived in a free market society, which we don't, because they'd be money and you'd lend them out and you'd get that's how they generate interest. But that's not the world that we live in. But he's talking about taking the money out and putting it in gold and silver. Problem is that I think gold and silver, and incidentally, today as we speak, silver was down $1, which is, well, what is that? That's about 4%. It's not a huge move, but it's a big move for one day for a commodity. And gold was down a couple % today. So these things do fluctuate, but there's always a problem. You're going to pay that penalty, which you pointed out, when you break your pension plan early. And then you've got to worry about keeping your gold and silver safe, and no easy answers on anything.
One thing that I did, and I made it possible for all my employees to do through our 401k plans, is we made it so that there's a self-directed option where you can basically, have that put into your own brokerage account, which you then can have the selection of all the assets that are publicly traded within that brokerage. And so while that's not exactly what he's talking about and doesn't directly address your question, if you think that gold, the market's going to go bad, certain sectors are going to be hit and your investment options are specifically limited in your 401k or very expensive in your 401k, then you should look and see if you can move it into if you can transfer it into a self-directed account, at least so that you can make wiser choices with a broader selection of investment options.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. But these are real problems, especially at this moment when everything is very expensive, or in a bubble even, frankly.
Everything is very expensive. And, while just I have to say, while silver went down 4% today, so far Bitcoin is up 7% today. It's back to 42,000.
Oh, well, that's good.
Yeah.
Well, it's the importance of diversification among
Exactly.
well-chosen assets that hopefully don't all move together
Exactly.
in the same direction.
So, Doug, this guy he says, yes, do you agree with his saying that, quote, North America is the new South Africa and the, quote, DNC is the new ANC, unquote? I know that Doug is, has a lot of South African experience with your wife, et cetera. He's Portuguese, and he did his graduate work in the U.S., and he's convinced that he's not making his graduate work, I think, on this topic, and he's convinced he's not making a silly statement. What do you think about that? A comparison.
Yeah, is the U.S. going to go in the direction of South Africa? I think South Africa is really screwed. I mean, talk about problems that we have in the U.S. They're much bigger problems that they have in South Africa. There's going to be real violence there, and not just between the 2 white tribes and the 12 major black tribes. It's going to be between various black tribes themselves, because when their infrastructure starts collapsing, these people are going to get very, very unhappy. Well, just as recently, they tore up a lot of shopping in the major cities.
Yep.
So, yeah, it's quite possible.
But it's, the thing is that the slide for South Africa has been decades long. In this where, I mean, I remember even 5 years ago listening to some of the incredibly inflammatory statements like made in the light of day by politicians that we should, kill these white farmers. I mean,
Yeah.
and I mean, it was out there then. And so, but it still didn't, it didn't get to, it's still there, I guess, and it's getting worse and worse by the day. And there was a major event, obviously, a couple of weeks ago, but I don't know. South Africa is way ahead of the curve.
Sure, there was an old saying with the ANC: one boer, which is a farmer in Afrikaans, one bullet. And of course, this is a good opportunity. Let me tell you a fun joke South Africans like to tell. So there's this nice old white woman who's always treated her servants very well. And she says to her servant, she says, "Twopence, I've heard that the servants are talking about killing all of us one night while we sleep. Is that true? Would you kill me while I slept? We have a good relationship." And Twopence says, "Oh, no, ma'am. No, I would not possibly think of hurting you. I'll go over to the neighbor's place and cut their throats, and their boys will come over here and cut your throats." It's kind of a funny joke.
Gallows humor. That's what you come to in South Africa for sure.
That's right.
So next question, Doug, what's your take on the grand solar minimum?
Well, this of course relates to global warming or not. And looking at this from the point of view of somebody who's interested in astronomy and geology, we know that the Earth has gone through many, many stages, heating and cooling, over the 4.5 billion years it's been in existence. And is it heating or cooling right now? Well, that's a good question, because we're not sure we can trust the measurements for a lot of reasons, because measurements were not accurate, because cities, you go back to someplace where they're taking temperatures for 150 years. Okay, even if they're intellectually honest and reporting these things properly, as the city grew up around it, the local ambient temperature changes, and who knows to what degree and so forth. There's so many different things. This is worth a a whole show talking about all the different things that contribute to changes in the climate. Forget about the weather. But it all comes back to the sun.
Mm.
It does come back to the sun, because the earth would be a cold ball of dirt floating around at a couple degrees above absolute zero if it wasn't for the sun. So fluctuations in the sun mean much more directly and indirectly than everything else. So at this point, it appears the sun is cooling, and it appears cyclically that the climate is cooling, regardless of the hysteria, with what's that silly little girl's name, Greta? How dare you? That girl.
Exactly.
Right. So
Yeah.
it's all about the sun. And I never hear these people talking about, what the sun is said to be doing.
Well, we can't really tax the sun or regulate the sun.
No, can't.
Yeah. It's can't be used as a useful political tool. So it just doesn't seem like it's relevant for today's day and age.
No.
But
I mean,
so
what good does it do to blame it on the sun when we can blame it on evil capitalists? They're here, and we can do something about them. The sun's there. We can't do anything about him.
Well, and let's be honest, this has to do with the patriarchy, really, when it comes down to it, right? It must be the patriarchy.
It does come down to the patriarchy. They're the ones that invented all this stuff that makes our life pleasant and heats the maybe.
So what I say is, if you recognizing that the grand solar minimum is a cycle the sun goes through, should that be factored into deciding where to live, over the next decade, over the next couple of decades?
I don't think so.
Okay.
I mean, your problem isn't the Earth's climate. Your problem is the other 7 billion chimpanzees on this planet. So I would figure where I'm going to live mostly based upon demographics as opposed to climatology.
Smart. Great. Okay. Simple question. Are you buying T-bills or keeping with cash?
Well, that's a good question. I mean, T-bills, cash, they're almost the same thing, except T-bills give you a fraction of a percent of yield, direct obligation of the US government. Cash, no yield, but has other advantages and disadvantages. The answer is really no. I'm mostly fully invested in speculations I like. I mentioned one of them earlier, Marin's climate deal called
Carbon
streaming. It's not to tout the stock at all. I mean, I said my piece on that and why I'm in it, but mostly speculating in mining and oil stocks, which has always been my bent to go towards those things. But now is a very good time to do it. So that's where I am mostly, as opposed to cash or bills.
Okay. What do you think of the Pelerin Society? Have you heard of it? Do you know anything about it?
I have. It was founded by Friedrich von Hayek and I think Milton Friedman. And I think even Mises himself had something to do with the founding of it. It was well over 50 years ago. And I actually was invited to a meeting of it, which I went to. It was held in Guatemala City that particular year that I went. And it's a bunch of old guys, almost all conservatives or neocons, a lot of them, that give long, boring, irrelevant papers. And so I thought it was a waste of time. And I could join the Mont Pelerin Society because I know a number of its members and I could get recommendations from them and all this type of thing. But do I really want to go someplace and listen to boring papers and talk to about, I'd say 85% of these people are conservatives or neoliberals or neocons or something. It's changed. It's like every group that's set up with good intentions, it becomes corrupt and it goes off balance and askew. So it's not what it once was.
I
And
think
I have no interest in it.
people like Karl Popper, I think, were original members of it, yeah. So but yeah, these things degrade over time. All organizations seem to. This is a topic we come to again and again.
Yeah. So, I wish them well and I hope they come right, but I'm not going back to another of their meetings.
All right. Next question is on Hungary. What are your thoughts on Budapest? And Hungary in general? What about real estate investing in Budapest?
Well, I have a warm feeling for Budapest because in the 60s, when me and two other hippies were taking the Orient Express from Switzerland to Istanbul, we got off in Budapest. And of course, the first thing that we noticed about the place back then was it smelled like we were just outside a steel mill. I mean, the air was horrible and smelled industrial. But so we checked into our hotel. Three of us were sharing a room. And what do you know? Down at the main desk, we couldn't have been there for more than an hour. We got word from three really good-looking Hungarian girls that spent a lot of time with us then. That's what happened. I mean, it was a hippie's delight. So my first experience with Hungary was great. And of course, as we went around the city, it was interesting to notice, because this was 1966, 67, actually about the new year. And it was interesting to notice that in lots of buildings, there were bullet holes, pocks in the concrete and, stuff like that. Because, hey, it was only 20 years after the war, and it was only 10 years after the Hungarian Revolution in 56. So that was kind of exotic to, see the fact they hadn't fixed up any of this stuff, communist country. Although it was communism light kind of in those days. It was the least, nothing like East Germany, which was nasty. So
you've been
good memories of Hungary. And then I went back about 10 years ago, and it wasn't at all the same, So, but right now, Hungary is a very interesting country.
It is.
It's they're the one country which is member of the EU, which is keeping out the migrants, and the president, or is he the prime minister, Viktor Orban, is very forthright about saying, look, we're interested in preserving our culture and our language and our way of doing things and our so forth. So we don't want these migrants here who are going to be a burden on us. Let them go elsewhere.
Right.
It's like a bar at closing time, You don't have to go home, but you can't stay here.
Well, and he doesn't seem opposed to immigration. He's opposed to immigration in that way, where people are basically just deciding, I want to come to your country, so we're coming. He wants the normal process where people the country gets to decide who comes.
Yeah. It's not like a million people show up and say, hey, give us food and a place to stay. No, that's just not proper. So, other than that, Orban, who's got this terrible reputation for that in Europe, he's a democratic socialist. He's a Hungarian nationalist. Actually, I think he's a Christian Democrat,
Yep.
Yeah, it's kind of they're all kind of, social welfare, this type of thing. So it's not like I support him as a politician, but I absolutely support him in what he's well known for, which is, acting in his own country's interests.
Well, and he seems to be acting in at least the way it's presented, in the Hungarian people's interest. I mean, meaning that there's a focus on, and I think this is personally, as somebody who's family, I think is important. Like the tax regime is not set up to the benefit of international corporations or international banks as much as it is for Hungarian families, which Seems like that's makes more sense, you know. And I'm like, I notice in Denver, there's, the city is very, very interested in making sure that they're attracting big companies, and new developments to the city, which is good for the economy. And I agree and get that. And they're providing all these incentives to do that. And they also seem to not really mind all the homelessness and campers, that are out there. But there seems to be, but the livability of families in the city is just gets worse by the day. And because there's no effort to improve that. And I just think it stood out to me that this guy has taken real effort to do it. And I think there was some tax policy I read about a few years ago, and I could be wrong on this. If someone knows more details, please put it in the comments, where if you had 3 kids, you no longer had to pay income taxes.
Oh, really? Is that right?
Yeah.
Interesting.
It's trying to, because everyone, all these Western countries are experiencing, population implosion. And they need, if you want to, preserve the country, then you need people. And what the decision that other countries have made, like Germany, like the US, is to import people.
Right. Which basically means destroying the basic culture and the things that made the Germany and the US what they are.
Yes.
It's like, England doesn't have a problem with demographic implosion. They can import 100 million Pakistanis and no population problem anymore.
Exactly. And that's how they've been fighting it. I think just like we've been doing here in the US. So question, do you think that, or the question is, everyone that's on Medicare or any other government entitlement, what are they going to do when these entitlements require vaccinations in order to, continue receiving that entitlement? Of course, there's an assumption here that will be a requirement, but it doesn't seem out of the realm of possibility. That's for sure.
No, considering that for some reason, which I presume is nefarious, they want everybody vaccinated. Of course, everybody that, if they want their check, they got to show they're vaccinated. They're playing the game. Yeah, I think that's a logical next step. Of course, sure, that's going to happen. But of course, all welfare and government handouts of all types, no exceptions, should be eliminated post haste. And not tomorrow morning. That'd be too disruptive, but within the next couple of years, I think it can be done. Then you wouldn't have to, then the government wouldn't have anything to hold over you.
Yes. And I think
they'll do what they're told.
Well, but Doug, as you know, I have, I work extremely hard to not receive a penny of anything ever. Like, it really is deeply offensive to me when I got a child tax credit payment automatically put in my account, and I'm going to close that bank account and I'm going to open a new one because I don't want them to giving me the money.
Yeah, but you may be going too far, because, if look at it as a rebate on your taxes. You don't want to hurt yourself to make an ideological statement, which is lost in the shuffle, kind of.
Like, it won't matter. There's no statement that I could make by doing anything like that. But actually, for me, incentives can be corrupting. Just like we talked about how the mob psychology, it's like you get a little, and then you can justify it. You can say, this is reasonable. I mean, after all the money I pay these guys in taxes, I mean, this little bit that I'm getting is like, it's a rounding error, right? So like, yeah, why not? It's just like you said, a tax rebate. But I feel like it's different. It is different when they're sending me a check every month, and that's how they're doing it. And I just think it messes with people's psychology. They take these different benefits, and then, it's a slippery slope, I guess is my point.
It is a slippery slope. So I applaud your moral uprightness on this.
But I'm trying to avoid what I know is a psychological trap that I can fall into, just like everyone else, I guess, is my big thing. But
yeah, of course.
So let's see, next question is a 23-year-old Italian who graduated from a top Russian university in St. Petersburg. He says he lived for 4 years in Russia and is now moving to the Netherlands for a master's degree in cybersecurity. Question is, should I stay in Europe after graduation for a few years and then move to Russia or back to Russia and then move to Russia, or move back to Russia immediately after getting citizenship, although salaries there are much lower compared to Europe?
Good question. What kind of opportunities might there be in Russia today? I actually don't know what opportunities are available in Russia. I can't answer that question.
Well, I think
But
the interesting,
the salaries, you'd be working for peanuts in Russia. I guess if I was going to be in Russia, I would look to hook up with an oligarch, frankly, who has capital.
right? And as somebody, if you're a cybersecurity expert, we all know that there are, there are. You would think that an oligarch would be a high value target for people who wanted to, get into his personal records and things. And having just like you would have a bodyguard on hand, eventually you got to imagine that the very, very rich and high value target type people are going to want to have a cyber bodyguard, on staff. And so, I mean, I could definitely see that happening in the future.
Of course, being a bodyguard is a dangerous occupation. And I would think being a cyber bodyguard might be at least as dangerous. I mean, the person you're protecting might become suspicious of you using your skills to steal things from him.
That's a good point. It's dangerous when you're working with these people, no matter what.
Yeah, it is. It's dangerous working with them. That's right.
But, at the same time, your salary would likely be much higher.
Yeah, but don't think of working for an ordinary Russian salary. I think that's a big mistake.
Big mistake. Yeah. If nothing else, actually, this is a great thing about being if you're an engineer focused in cybersecurity, there's no reason why you can't have clients all over the world. I've used software developers, from Brazil. I've used them from Ukraine. I've used them from Russia in the past. Like and while the wages I pay them are lower than I might pay a US person, they're much higher than the local wages are. And so it's a great situation for everybody.
I would think that if the questioner develops really good skills on cybersecurity and ways to insulate people's wealth online, he might be able to turn that into a really good international business. I mean, there are people, rich guys all over strange places in the world, like Africa. They have a lot of money, but there's not a lot of local expertise to help them shepherd it. So he could use his skills to go there and solicit these people and lock up a whole market for himself.
That's a really good point. Okay. Doug, do you think that Switzerland will be one of the least bad countries to live in for the next few years?
I do. I think it's going to be one of the better places in Europe, actually. It's wealthy. It has, it's a gun culture. It's stable. I'm a big fan of Switzerland. Expensive, but not a bad choice. A little bit constipated also, but still pleasant, nice, safe.
One of the least bad.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Okay, so this is somebody who I think is living in Germany currently. Says, I'm thinking of moving to Kazakhstan and to do agroforestry there. What downsides do you see with Kazakhstan off the top of your head with the experience of people there?
Well, not a great experience. I mean, I should say not extensive experience. Been there twice, I think, maybe 3 times, twice at least. And giant country, a lot of Russians, a lot of Kazakhs, other Stan type people. No real opinions on that. Seems like what happens in Kazakhstan is basically about resources, oil, and
uranium,
and other mining, perhaps. Forestry, of course, the forests, but I don't know. You just have to go there and bounce around.
Do you think
that's the answer? It's to go, to go on site and just bounce around and make sure you meet lots and lots of people until something clicks and the opportunity presents itself. But it's not going to happen if you're just sitting at home in the US. You got to go there and bounce around. And even when you go there, you can't just go there and sit in your hotel room. You got to get out on the street and talk to everybody. Once again, it's going to help if you speak the local language.
Yeah. All right, good. Let's see. Next question. This is another entitlement question. What do you think the future of Social Security system is? Do you think it'll be cut way back, or eliminated?
Oh, I don't think they dare really eliminate it. It's basically, your Social Security payments just aren't going to keep up with the degradation of the currency. That's what's been happening for the last 10 years. And that's the way it'll come to an end, because the thing is totally and completely bankrupt. I mean, and it's unaffordable. The U.S. government, it's a major liability for it in terms of current expenses as well as projected future expenses. In fact, it's the biggest one. The biggest one is Social Security, followed by Medicare and then Medicaid, and things like the defense budget. Or it's like a little tiny piece of the pie by comparison with those big ones.
Politically, it'd be very hard to get rid of any of those programs, or reduce them in a way that people could identify. It'd have to be like just the inflation, inflating them away or whatever.
Yeah, it's a scam. It's a Ponzi scheme. It's going to come to an end, as all Ponzi schemes and scams must. Make a lot of people unhappy, but
no doubt. Let's see. Next question. This is a real estate or precious metals question, I guess. This is a person who is from Kuwait, and loves your take on everything. And he says that believing that precious metals prices are going to continue to increase, more than other assets. His question is the best opportunity in that, or is it in miners, or is it in real estate? And the problem with this question, I think, is that he's asking about the local real estate in Kuwait, which he says is high density. It's all in one area with high demand, and real estate has been increasing rapidly in price over the recent history.
Yeah, I just don't know what to say about that. I have no familiarity with the Kuwaiti real estate market. And, one of the problems, well, I don't know, I've owned real estate all over the world, frankly. And it's generally been very good to me, generally. But what should he do? Look, I think the action is going to be in the mining stocks more than anything else. That's the way I'm playing it. So if it turns out that you see that mining stocks and oil stocks have gone down 90%, you can assume that my standard of living has dropped significantly.
Right. Yes. Okay, Doug, what 3 languages should everyone know for the 21st century?
Well, English is obviously number 1, but you speak English, so that's great. Chinese, hard to learn, I think, because it's a totally different language using tones as opposed to, learning to write in characters. It's the most alien language, but it's a very important one, so worth learning. And what would be the 3rd language? It would be either Spanish or French. That's what I would say. English, Chinese, and either Spanish or French.
I guess it depends on what part of the world you plan to spend time in, whether it's French or if you're going to be in Africa more, right? You'd assume it'd be
exactly.
French. Yeah.
French. And so in Latin America, well, obviously Spanish.
Okay. Let's see, Doug, if you were 21 years old again, living in your hometown in the USA, had $25,000 in capital, where would you go, and what would you do from that point on?
Well, it's tougher now than it was before this COVID hysteria took over the world. I mean, traveling is just not what it used to be in a lot of different ways. Crossing borders is not the same as it used to be. I don't know how hard it is in Africa, but as I've said many times in past conversations here, you don't want to be someplace where it's a level playing field. I don't like level playing fields. I like a playing field that's tilted in my direction. So based on that, where do you go? Best place for you to go is Africa, where you're different, where the gradient is of the average guy is way below what it is here. No, you got to go to Africa. That's how hard is it now? I just don't know. Things have changed so much in the last couple of years, but that's my objective if I were you.
Great. Makes sense. Oh, can you comment on the investment saying, quote, it's better to be a year early than a day late? Have you seen this principle tested over time to be true or false?
Yeah, well, I think it's true, frankly. Depends on how patient you are and the degree of certainty that you have in your own mind on being correct. Of course, certainty can work both for you and against you.
Yeah, I can.
But, it's this question of, yeah, it's inevitable, but is it imminent? These things can take a long time. But look at it the way Warren Buffett did. I mean, I'm not sure that his methodology of investing for the near future is going to have the kind of success that it's had throughout most of his life. I mean, this is going to be a rather chaotic period where a lot of things could change. So his basic method, I think, is going to be fine, but not for the next 10 years. But I'd still, that said, take a lesson from Buffett. And he's a long-term oriented guy. And he gets in when the price is right. And sometimes has had to wait a long time for the truth to evidence itself. So, yeah, I'm a believer.
One of the things about that quote that is interesting to me is it really only considers, especially with regard to investing, the upside, like it's you miss out on an investment opportunity. So if you're late, then you missed out on the investment opportunity. But I think that there's the other part of it where being a day late can cause ruin, and I think that's like I don't know how that would necessarily apply to investing, but it certainly applies to other things. I mean, we were talking about offline yesterday about making just life choices, and you repeated this saying in that with regard to life choices, and so, where a day late could involve ruin in some way, or disaster in some way. Is there that same inverse? Can this quote essentially apply to investing on the downside as well as just looking at it for missing out on upside opportunities?
Yeah, better to be I think that saying, it's better to be a year early than a day late. I think it mostly has political implications because these people can close a border in a day and do something that can make a market exist or not exist or explode or disintegrate in a day. So I think that saying, that aphorism, mostly revolves around what people do.
So it's
political people.
Okay.
So, and of course, what we were talking about is, what if these morons in Washington and God knows where else actually close the borders? I mean, well, then it's better to be a year too early, or you're gonna be trapped like a lobster.
Exactly.
Then again, if every damn country in the world does that, you're trapped like a lobster. You just got to pick your lobster pot.
Yes.
Yeah. So,
yeah. So you think this saying that is designed that is used for investing is really more about the avoiding ruin than it is about trying to profit?
Yeah, I think so. Like if you're afraid that a bank is going to fail, yeah, better get out now. Don't wait until everybody else is sure it's going to fail, because it's too late then when everybody else is sure it's going to fail.
Got it. Okay. I may have always misunderstood that, because when I thought of that in investment context, I always thought it was like, yeah, you miss out on some gains, but that happens. My worry is always ruin because
Yeah, I wouldn't,
there's
yeah, I
other
wouldn't worry about missing out on the gains because there's always another train leaving the station. Always, constantly trains leaving the station. But you know, if you see a disaster coming, yeah, be a year too early, and then you don't have to worry about your timing anymore.
Good. Okay. Next question. What do you think about all of these cycles that people talk about? There's a lot of different people that talk about these cycles. So there's like Mike Maloney has this wealth cycles. This person says Bo Polney has 1, 2, 3, 4, and Daniel's timeline cycles, as well as the Trump cycle, the Martin Armstrong's pi cycle, Cliff High's predictive linguistics. I mean, what do you think about cycles in general? Those ideas.
Look, I don't disagree with anything. I mean, the earth turns, 4 seasons are cyclical. The day and night are cyclical. I mean, a lot of things are cyclical. So I don't disagree with any of these things. But when it comes to predicting human action, I don't think it's quite so easy as knowing that at 6 a.m. tomorrow, well, cyclically, the sun's going to rise again. It's not that easy. So it's helpful to be aware of these things. But, you know, a lot of these things that people come up with are marketing gimmicks, it seems to me.
Yeah, it seems that way. And then another part of his question was, he says, there has never been a collapse of a world reserve currency. He says there have been collapsed fiat currencies per individual country like Zimbabwe or Venezuela and Argentina, et cetera. First of all, I want your thoughts. Is that true? Has there never been a collapse or a failure? Maybe not on the Zimbabwe level, but there's been failures of global reserve currencies, haven't there?
Well, we only had global currencies, really. I mean, starting with the Roman denaro. Well, it's not. Look, we've only had currencies or coins since about the 6th century BC, when Lydia coined the first coin. So, you know, when you look at it from that point of view, we've only been around monetarily for 2,600 years, which isn't a very long time. I mean, it's the lifetimes of like 30 long-lived men who all could have known each other and passed knowledge from. It's not really very long when you look at it in terms of geological time. But
what do you think about the British, though? The British Empire. It wasn't maybe they did their, they didn't have a global reserve currency status per se, but certainly, their influence over the financial system was profound with the empire, and that did collapse, and cause all kinds of problems.
But the pound sterling was originally a pound of sterling silver.
Right.
And the pound is still there today, although it's a teeny weeny shadow of its former self, but the currency itself is still in existence. It's the oldest currency in the world, I think.
But its reserve currency status changed.
It did. It was replaced by the dollar. And is the dollar going to be absolutely wiped out? I don't know. It's a good question. Maybe it'll be more like the pound, where it'll kind of dribble off to gradually nothing.
And it did cause remarkable chaos for certainly for the Brits when this happened, because they went off. They went off the gold standard, during, I guess, after World War I, right? But didn't they go off the gold standard? And then then they went back on it to try and add some stability. And then because they were having all these internal problems and like global trade was all screwed up because it was all, because of the British dominance was so substantial in advance of all that, and so there was a failure in my mind of a world reserve currency system with the British, and it was replaced by us, but seems like.
But once again, we're really in such early days, because really up until, let's say, whether you want to say World War I, where some currencies became unredeemable, or the early 1930s, where gold went out of circulation all over the world. So gold was used as money, or silver before that. So it wasn't really an issue. The state just put a stamp on a piece of metal guaranteeing its purity. So this is a very recent problem. It's been with us now for like 80 or 90 years, this problem of world currencies and reserve currencies and so forth. It's not very long from a historical point of view.
Okay. That's interesting. I want to think more about that, but just like what the effect would be, and maybe do some more reading about that transition, all the pain that it caused for the Brits in global trade, as you know, that their whole system sort of fell apart. You know, their status as it changed between the world wars. But
well, it's going to be a big problem for the Americans because our major export at this point is U.S. dollars, and it's a great trade. We ship them, you know, basically ephemeral, worthless US dollars, and the foreigners ship us all kinds of real stuff. So when the US dollar is no longer reserve currency, we're going to be in the same position as the Argentines. Nobody's taking Argentine pesos. They can't export them. We're going to be in that position too.
All right. So let's see. The war on drugs, war on poverty, war on terror has never ended. Will the war on the virus ever end? Will the vaccine passports morph into the central bank and social credit wallet?
Looks like that's going to happen. It's a terrifying prospect. I think these criminals have finally hit on a formula that works. I mean, yeah, this is really serious. This is really serious stuff.
So with the U.S. Ceasing its control over the domain name system, you know, and really weaponizing ICANN, which is this association that controls domain names, to basically they can take websites offline easily because it's all centrally controlled. Does it risk a split in the global internet network? Who will now want to be part of the U.S. dominated internet, and may we be localized? May there be a localized internet like a Russian internet and a China internet?
Yeah, maybe you're going to have to be a member of several different internets because you can't trust any of these people, because the people that run all these governments are essentially criminals. I mean, let's admit it. So yeah, it'll be fractured. It'll become a form of neo-feudalism, electronic feudalism, if you will. So I don't know what you do about that.
Well, I think the answer is we had Marco Wutzer on before, and one of the things that Marco talked about being exciting from his point of view was there's domain names that were a foundation of a totally decentralized internet. So they did not go through. They did not need these central name servers, basically, or organizations like ICANN in order to get the issuance of a domain name and the control of that domain name. So that decentralization is a huge technological opportunity. You know, it works this way with cryptocurrencies, and I think it certainly does with the internet as well. There's something called IPFS, I believe it's called, the Internet Protocol File System, I think is what it stands for. But anyway, what it does is it allows totally decentralized connection from, it's like peer-to-peer, essentially, access to websites, to files, et cetera. And if that technology is built up enough, and if as pressure increases, I think where there's more control, like I think that is the answer. And I think that it's quite promising, actually, how far it's come in the last couple of years. It's just my opinion. But
well, not being a computer jock, I can't give what I consider to be a meaningful opinion on that. But perhaps we can work on Paladin Net, which was Charles Knight's innovation in the last book, Assassin. Good reason, incidentally, for listeners to read Assassin, see what they think of the idea of the Paladin Net and the Paladin coin, and whether that can be put into effect in the real world to the great profit of all concerned, I might point out.
Yeah, actually, let me clarify the call to action here, especially I strongly encourage you to read Assassin, but especially if you're an entrepreneur or a technologist, and especially if you're a technologist that has blockchain experience, it would be really, really helpful if you would read that book and learn about the idea in there around the Paladin network, which we think has lots of potential. And if you think it's interesting, let us know, so that maybe we can figure out a way to work together on it, because I think it's got tremendous potential. So
yeah, it's very exciting potential in a number of ways. So let us know.
We don't have a white paper for it, so you really got to read the book, unfortunately, or fortunately. It's actually, you'll enjoy the book, but you got to see the context of the way it's used.
And who knows, maybe we can work together to put together a white paper and take the show on the road.
That's what we want to do. Yep. Great. Okay. So this is someone from the Netherlands. They say they're very interested in economic freedom and prosperity and being as far away from Marxism and the Bolsheviks as possible. They have job opportunities today in London as well as Singapore. Where of those two would you recommend they go?
I would personally go to Singapore. I think Singapore is going to do a lot better than England in the future. Just my feeling. And I like the Orient anyway, more than, tired, burned out old Europe.
Yeah. I mean, London is a interesting place, but it's just gotten worse every time I've gone there. And, Singapore is, I think in terms of, if you're really interested in the maximum freedom, you're not going to find it, honestly, probably in either one of those places, but the level of the standard of living, the quality of life can be extremely high still in Singapore, I think, even regardless of that. So,
yeah, I agree. No, I'd have to choose Singapore.
Okay, let's see. Next question. As America's problems continue to get worse, does Doug foresee a refugee crisis between Canada and the US as Americans flee the country?
Well, I don't know.
For Canada,
America's actually going to flee. It's not like we're penniless Mexicans, although there are going to be a lot more Americans living in tents in public parks in the next couple of years. But what good is it going to do them to flee to Canada?
it's not like in the Vietnam War, maybe where they offered some freedom from forced servitude in the Marine Corps or something.
Yeah, because it's not like Canada's a free country. In fact, you can argue that Canada's less free than the US insofar as it's more free. It's just because it's smaller and the government doesn't have as much in the way of resources as the US government does. But, it's potent. It's fire and frying pan. I mean,
I agree. Okay. Doug mentioned in a recent episode that if America experiences a civil war, a bad person will eventually emerge. History certainly suggests this to be true. After the war with the British, the victors formed America, though. The example put forward here is going back quite some time in history. Sorry, the question is this: could Doug see in America where people who assume government control are more like America's forefathers or founding fathers than the people who are running the circus now?
No, because there's over 300 million people in this geographical area called the US. And we're already a multicultural domestic empire. I mean, you can't get all these people together to agree on anything. I mean, even when the country was founded, where everybody was basically a British immigrant, basically, and there were only 3 million of them, even then, it was hard enough to get them to agree on something. So it's totally impossible right now. That's not going to happen. I think it's more likely that the US is going to break up. I'll tell you an idea that I kind of like. It's that somebody who's ultra wealthy, I mean, that, you've got to be $100 billion neighborhood wealthy in today's world, could get next to some small country with a low population and a lot of land and buy a province from them. Basically spin off using that country's umbrella into a new country and do it right. It would be kind of a kingdom where the guy that bought the province, called the shots. But if he was of goodwill, the place might last and be pretty nice for, I don't know, a couple of generations anyway.
Yep. But it would probably take a single individual, or maybe three or four, because the agreement, like you would never be able to even coordinate, the deal getting done. It's just it'd be too hard. I think it really needs to come from one person, and there's not that many people that have that kind of money.
No, I mean, is Elon Musk going to do it? Assuming he ever got liquid. No, he's more interested in these projects. So that's where his head's at. That's what he wants to do. This isn't where his head's at. But, if somebody else or several other people that, are right thinking and have generated a lot of money. But, once you have $100 billion, you say, oh, I don't want to lose that $100 billion. I don't want to lose it. But in today's world, I mean, how can you be sure of maintaining control of it? Frankly, right. So it's like the story that some economist wrote about that 5 billionaires paid him a lot of money, which a lot of money, he was a college professor, to get together and give them advice on after they set up their little enclave, how do we protect ourselves from our bodyguards? Maybe the bodyguards will just take over and steal all our shit. Well, that's a very reasonable question. And there actually was no answer to it other than, well, choose your bodyguards wisely, be friendly with them, and carry a gun on your own person also. That'll help.
Yeah. Yeah, you got to be Putin careful, where someone offers him a mint and he's like, nah, I don't take anything from anybody. Like he knows that like anyone could turn on him at any time.
Yeah, exactly. Not a good situation. So I would think if I had $100 billion lying around, yeah, I would send out minions to investigate small countries that might want to part with an island or a province. Mm-hmm. Yeah. That'd be interesting. And you'd have plenty of money left over to build the infrastructure and the facilities so that people aren't going to have to go there and live in mud huts and grub for roots and berries. People don't want to do that today. They don't want to be pioneers today, understandably.
Yep. Yeah. Don't even know how to be pioneers today. Let's be honest.
No, exactly.
Okay. Let's see. Okay. Here's a weird one. What are Doug's thoughts on the flat/dome Earth theory?
It's amazing. People come up with, I'd like to, I saw that you sent me that question before, and there was a computer link.
There's a video, yeah.
And I hit on it, but it didn't take me anywhere. Were you able to watch? It was an 8-hour. I'm not going to spend 8 hours listening to this because it's just nonsense. Anybody that knows anything about simple geography that walks out, this is completely bizarre, crazy shit. That's what it is. But so I'm sure. Listen, I'm sure the questioner is a nice person. And actually, I had a friend that, the same friend, oddly, the same friend that I talked about earlier that fixed the lights in my basement in Georgetown. He believed in this stuff. How can you deal with that? All you can do is just recognize that whoever believes this stuff has so little knowledge of basic science, or has an area of their brain where they're just actually crazy. And you got to take that into consideration when you deal with them in the future. So not trying to insult the questioner, but no, there's no reality to it at all. And I'm not going to listen to an 8-hour presentation on it.
I know. Well, one of the things I think about this is that there's been, the practical skills to work within the physical reality around us are not taught anymore. So people really don't know how to do, very simple things to measure things. Like for instance, if the Earth were really flat, then would that maybe that might affect the way you would think that the way that the sun goes around the Earth, right? You would think. So you'd be able to get on the phone with your friend in New York, and you could say, "Where's the sun in the sky for you?" And you would think that position would be closer than if the Earth were actually flat. Like it would be very it will be very different. in the world that we live in. But if the world was flat, the Earth was flat, then you'd think that the position of the sun would be much closer. You'd think,
All about 1,000 or 10,000 different things all speak to the fact that, as many lies and misunderstandings as there are in the world, I think we can be reasonably certain at this point that the Earth is round.
Yeah, I think we can. The other thing I think is worth it psychologically to talk about, though, with this topic is that it does seem like no one trusts anything. And one of the interesting things about cycles is in Neil Howe's book, The Fourth Turning, which is about cycles. They talk about this stage of the cycle where there basically is total lack of trust in anything. Like, you don't know what to believe about anything. And I think we see the idea that these things become so prominent, where lots of people spend 8 hours watching it, but learning about it, is just because there's such a deep lack of trust, and so they're just easy to fall in those traps.
That's true. And if you got 8 hours to spare to watch something like that, you either have no money at all because you don't know how to allocate your time, or you got so much money you can just watch any kind of shit because it doesn't make any difference anymore. Probably the former.
You probably, yeah. Well, recently I've spent about that amount of time in this the teaching company's course on quantum physics because I wanted to learn more about that. That's, I think, a lot more interesting than flat Earth stuff. But
yeah,
up to you how you spend your time.
That's right.
Let's see. Next question. Trying to get through as many as possible. Let's take another 10 minutes or so, and we'll just knock out as many as we can, Doug. I know going a little long. With Brexit seriously limiting options for Brits wanting to move to Europe for retirement and a lower cost of living, where would Doug suggest Brits go for retirement?
Where should a Brit retire? Well, it used to be that Brits would go to southern Spain to die, just like, New Yorkers would go to Florida.
Yep.
But look, I think you should pick a third world country. So I'd pick a place in the Orient, or maybe pick a place in North Africa. Go to the coast in Morocco. In Morocco, that might be nice. Close to Britain, weather's nice. It's cheap. There's choices like that you can make.
Not necessarily just because of lower cost of living, but you have a friend who has been who lives in, I believe is it the Isle of Man, or it's one of those other ones, the islands off of England that he's been.
Sark. I think he's in Sark. He's not really a friend of mine. We have lots of mutual friends.
I see.
When I subscribe to his letter, but I think is it Jersey or Guernsey or Sark, or is it Manx? I forget what island it is, but anyway, it's one of the Channel Islands, and I guess Manx is not in the Channel. Anyway, I forget, but yeah, it's
into those because it seems like there's a lot of really positive things happening, at least where this this newsletter writer is based.
Yeah. It's like part of England, but not. It's internally self-governing. England runs its foreign policy. Yeah, so there's oddball places like that. God, which place is it? Jersey, Guernsey, or
I think it might be Guernsey. Now that you say it, yeah.
Maybe it was.
We'll look it up. Yeah, but
you said real estate prices have gone up a lot with people, wanting to get the hell out of Britain. But of course, real estate prices have gone up a lot almost everywhere.
That's right. But it does sound like there's a lot of interesting opportunity there, and because they haven't gone the route of, the Caymans in terms of, tax sheltering stuff, that like their banking system is still trusted and it's still allowed to, it's not sanctioned like in the same way that a lot of the other, British territories are now, so there's a lot of interesting things.
And you don't have a powerful government apparently that tries to dominate you, and small, you get to know your neighbors. lots of pluses. A small island, of course, but you know, rich island, import, you know, nice food. Hey, listen, I'm very happy as long as I have, you know, a comfortable house, not extravagant, just comfortable, where you can keep your stuff, and, you know, a gym where you can get some exercise, and some restaurants. You don't need much, frankly, if you know how to amuse yourself.
Good company is nice from time to time. Yeah.
Very important. Exactly.
So next question is about Argentina. Is it off the table for a second home due to high inflation, or is it still a viable option?
No, inflation is not the problem in Argentina. The problem in Argentina is a criminal government that you don't know what they're going to do. I mean, these people running Argentina now, well, same as they've been running it for the last 10 years, you know, they could get as crazy as the Chavistas in Venezuela. I don't think they will, because Argentina is pretty different from Venezuela in a lot of important ways, but they'd like to do it. So, but inflation's just part of the problem in Argentina. Doesn't, as a foreigner, inflation is your friend.
Exactly.
Foreign income, foreign money. Yeah.
All real estate is purchased in dollars, US dollars.
Yeah.
I mean, at least maybe not all, but certainly the real estate, every real property I looked at there was, and the ones that I bought were.
It's true, but maybe the Kirchnerites are going to try to change that too. I mean, you know, say that no, you have to use. They're capable of almost any kind of craziness. So, which is why, as much as I love Argentina, I'm basically in Uruguay most of the time. But they can get crazy too. I mean, next year, I mean, you know, the Uruguayan people don't have any particular claim to wisdom. In fact, I'd say just the opposite. I mean, they might, anything can happen in any of these countries, especially democracies. You're talking about mob rule, basically, when you're talking about a democracy. So
yeah, but there seems to be an advantage to smaller countries that are producers.
Yeah.
You know, that are, you know, primarily, you know, export, you know, they have plenty of food and all that kind of thing, and they don't have to import oil in order to keep the lights on or anything like that. So, you know, there's, you know, anything.
Smaller is better. Smaller is better. The people that run the countries realize that they can't get ambitious about doing stuff because it's too small.
Well, they're not so, and they're also not as removed from the population as they are in large countries. The leaders are not. So, like, I was talking with a real estate agent who, you know, in Uruguay, and, you know, she knows the president well, like they're friends, and, you know, have known him for his whole life.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like then that could, like, how common is it to run into somebody who, you know, has known Joe Biden, you know, their whole life, or Kamala? I mean, it's just like these people are, they're an elite that are removed from society, essentially, in these large countries.
Exactly right. Yeah. Small countries have it all over big countries as a place to live. No question about that.
Let's see. Someone's asking to talk more about the effort to privatize countries, but I think we should save that for another episode. Let's see. Do you think colleges and universities could ever be salvaged? Or is there any country in the world where the academics aren't psychopaths?
That's a good question. I really don't think that the university system in the US can be salvaged. It is so totally and absolutely captured from the president and the administrators right on down to all of the professors. I don't know how you change a culture like that. I mean, it needs to be flushed, but I'm not sure how to do it. Anyway, why do you want to think about going to a college unless you need a piece of paper or a specific skill that requires lab work, like medicine or engineering in a way, things like that? So why bother even thinking about it in today's world?
I think that's a great point. I mean, you know, certainly if you have access to a library, lots of great information. If you have access to YouTube, or, you know, the teaching companies' courses, or, I mean, virtually everything Is all kinds of free Stanford courses online that you could take, from great professors actually that they have there. So
Yeah, you don't need to go to a university in order to, well, yeah, but I want to drink beer and meet girls. Well, you don't need to go to a university to do that. We're
no,
doing stuff. It's crazy. And pay huge amounts of money and get indebted and wind up wasting a huge amount of time with, stupid young yahoos that haven't figured things out yet. No, it's kind of ridiculous.
and I think, there's an inclination by people to salvage in these institutions, and, they just need to, these large institutions, whether they be, large nation states or whether they be, the college and university systems, they need to go the way of the dinosaurs and just they get replaced through innovation, through new technology. They're just like, where we have cars instead of horse and buggies. There needs to be, it's just because the way the economic incentives are set up and the cultural expectations are set up, that people still think that owning a horse and having a buggy is the right thing. But eventually, people there will be a shift, I think, and it'll probably be economically driven. It'll make you think that, hey, we should have cars, or the car version of better education.
Exactly. Well, gee, we can't lose our universities. It's like we can't lose our wonderful stables. And what about all the farmers who are growing oats for the horses? And no, it's going to be, the university system today is going to be washed away, and good riddance.
Exactly. Yes. And I think any effort to try and salvage them is just totally misdirected energy. It's totally misdirected. So, okay. With the current environment and more government/Fed purchases of mortgage-backed securities and treasuries, do you see a sequence of disinflation, deflation, hyperinflation, or inflation, and then hyperinflation? Like just this, he's basically, what I just described as his thinking around the sequence of these radical things: disinflation, deflation, hyperinflation or inflation, and then real hyperinflation.
Sure. Or all at once in different parts of the economy. I mean, what you're describing is chaos. And that's the way I bet. I don't know how this is all going to work out, because it so much depends on what the morons in the government do and how much force they decide to apply in different parts of the economy. So no, I'd say chaos.
Chaos. So let me, going back, if I think about going into the financial crisis, after the housing bubble in 2007, 2008, it seemed way more predictable from an investment standpoint about what to do. You're like, well, there's obviously this financial bubble that's out there because of real estate. And so it seemed clear that if I bought gold at that time, that it was going to go up in value if I didn't put a timetable on when it would happen, that it was going to be a smart decision. And it would have clearly been, it was a smart decision to buy gold then. But now something has changed. Things have changed so substantially since then that now I think there isn't any clarity. There is only chaos that you can plan for. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I do agree with that, actually. Things, the crystal ball is never clear, but it's foggier now than ever before for lots of different reasons. So best you can do is to look around and start thinking like a speculator. Start determining where is the biggest distortion on the upside, on the downside, this market, that market, and try to capitalize on it. I mean, unfortunately, we don't make the rules, but we have to play the game. Mm-hmm. And you can't be static in an environment that's shifting like this. You can't act like a potted plant. You're going to get eaten or washed away or something. So it's hard, and it's too bad, because it's not actually productive of new wealth. You're just trying to save what you have big problem. I agree.
And one of the things you say often is that in a depression, an actual depression, which you expect this greater depression to come up upon us, this is what we're entering or whatever, that it's not a matter of getting rich. Really, everyone gets hurt in it, and it's about trying to get to be hurt less, right? Isn't that you said something like that years ago? I heard you say.
The winner is the person that loses the least.
So
So it's there was a great book written by a guy named Gerald Loeb. I think he wrote that in the 40s or 50s. It was called The Battle for Investment Survival. Really, really a good book, I got to say. And it's like a battle. And in a titanic battle like this one, everybody takes casualties. Everybody gets hurt. Even if you're the winner, you're going to take casualties.
Avoiding ruin is the first rule, I think.
Yeah.
Okay, let's see. Next question here. Just do a couple more. Okay, this is a good question. Maybe we'll end it with this one. This person expects that most folks who get the jab will pass away over the next few years. Now, this has been a common thing we've been bubbling up on the internet. There are people saying this, that if you got it, you're gonna die over a period of 3 years for a whole host of reasons. Who knows whether that's true or not? The point, I think, is that for this person, it says it got them thinking a lot about death and the afterlife, and they want to know what your thoughts are on death and the afterlife.
Well, that is such an important question. And, oftentimes, even when I have just gotten to know somebody, I like to probe exactly what their thoughts on that are, because it's something that men have contemplated for many thousands of years. But I don't think most people actually talk about it. What happens after you die? I mean, how often have you been asked that question? Well, not every day. In fact, pretty rarely. So I don't know. We can talk about that sometime, but it's too late in the session to talk about the most cosmic question at all.
All right. We will save that for another day then, and we'll just wrap it up here. But and we'll try and tackle some of these remaining questions next week. So thank you very much, Doug. It was a lot of fun. I appreciate it.
It was, Matt. Thank you.